It started on a Friday evening, just before the sun dipped low enough to paint everything in that soft orange haze. Jane texted me out of nowhere while I was wrapping up work. "Can you meet me at the bus stop by the supermarket around 6? That was it. No punctuation, no explanation. Not even the usual red heart or smiley face she normally tagged onto random messages. Just plain text. I stared at the message for a second longer than I should have, and something about the tone made me feel weird. I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe she was picking up something heavy and needed help. Maybe her car battery died. Or maybe it was just one of those spontaneous, let's talk about life while the world goes by moments she sometimes liked to create. I responded with a simple sure, grabbed my jacket, and left the house. The sky had that in-between light, not quite sunset, not quite night, and everything around me felt too quiet, like the universe was holding its breath. The bus stop was on the corner of 12th and Fremont, next to the grocery store we always joked about hating because it smelled like old fruit and floor cleaner. I got there 5 minutes early. No sign of Jane yet, just a flickering street lamp and an old man sitting on the bench, mumbling to himself and holding a small plastic bag of what looked like day-old bread. I leaned against the metal pole and scrolled through my phone, not really reading anything, just waiting. At exactly 6:01, Jane appeared, like she'd been dropped out of the sky. She wasn't dressed fancy. No makeup, just jeans, a gray hoodie I recognized from my own closet, and her hair pulled back in a way that told me she hadn't looked in the mirror before leaving. She looked blank. I smiled instinctively when I saw her, started to say something like, "Hey, what's up?" But then I noticed her eyes. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me, like she'd already decided how this was going to go. And then she said it. "You know I'm not with him because of love." She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Calm. No emphasis. No apology in her tone. Just a single, devastating sentence tossed out like a used napkin. I froze. I wish I could say I asked a question. I wish I could say I confronted her or demanded answers. But I didn't. My body literally shut down. It was like a wire got cut inside me, and the connection between brain and mouth disappeared. She kept talking. I don't remember the next few seconds clearly, but I know she tried to undo it. Like she realized she'd just detonated something and was trying to stuff the explosion back into the grenade. "I mean, that came out wrong," she said quickly. "I'm just saying it's not like that. He's an old friend. We go way back. It's not what you think." I was still standing there like a statue. My thoughts were racing but making no progress, like a car stuck in mud. She kept going. "Nothing really happened," she added, a little too fast. "We just talked a few times. He's going through stuff. I was being supportive. It's not emotional or romantic. I don't know why I said that thing just now. It was a stupid thing to say. But the damage was already done." Her words hit like a sledgehammer in slow motion. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Like she didn't realize she'd just ripped a hole in our reality. That sentence cracked something in me I didn't know could crack. Because even though I didn't know who he was yet, the way she referred to him, like he was part of a situation I hadn't been made aware of, told me everything I needed to know. The bus pulled up a minute later, hissing as it slowed, the doors swinging open with a mechanical sigh. Jane gestured, half-heartedly, for us to get on together. Her eyes were darting around, avoiding mine, like she was hoping the scene would just reset itself. But I didn't move. I stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, heart thudding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. She waited another second, maybe two, then climbed onto the bus. The door closed, the bus pulled away, and I just stood there. The old man on the bench didn't say anything. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, a car alarm started going off. The kind of mundane chaos that would have irritated me any other day. But right then it was just noise. I walked home slower than usual, taking back streets I didn't normally use. Not because I was afraid of running into someone, but because I needed time. I needed to understand what had just happened. I needed the walk to mean something. When I got home, the lights were already on. Jane was in the kitchen, barefoot, drinking a glass of wine like she hadn't just lit a match and dropped it into our life. She smiled when she saw me, like nothing had happened. "You hungry?" she asked. "I was thinking pasta, the spicy kind you like." I nodded, said sure, sat down, didn't mention the bus stop. She cooked. We ate. We watched half an episode of some sitcom before she started nodding off on the couch. She leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to, and I let her. But everything felt off. The walls, the lights, even the sound of the dishwasher in the background. It all felt like it belonged to someone else's life. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, unable to sleep. Her sentence kept playing in my head like a broken recording. "I'm not with him because of love." That was the moment. That was the crack that would become the canyon. Because no matter how much she tried to spin it after, no matter how much pasta she made or how many reruns we watched, I knew. Some part of her had been somewhere else, with someone else, and maybe not for love, but for something, and I couldn't unknow that. The next morning, everything looked the same, but none of it felt the same. Jane made coffee, poured mine first like she always did. She put on that faded blue hoodie I bought her 2 birthdays ago. She even made a dumb joke about the neighbor's yappy dog, and I laughed. Out loud. That's the thing about shock. It doesn't always look like tears or screaming. Sometimes it just makes you act normal, like your brain is afraid to let your heart know what's going on. But inside, I wasn't there anymore. I was somewhere else, hovering above my own life like a stranger watching a scene unfold from a distance. Because now, for the first time, I wasn't just noticing things, I was collecting them. She told me she had to run a few errands that afternoon. I said okay without asking what or where. But after she left, I sat down and started listing everything that had been bothering me for the past few months. Stuff I'd dismissed at the time. Things that, alone, seemed like nothing. But now they felt like breadcrumbs. First, the perfume started showing up about 3 weeks ago. A scent I didn't recognize. Not strong, subtle, floral. Not her usual vanilla or lavender. I remember asking her about it once, and she laughed. Said she got a free sample from Sephora. "Don't you like it?" she asked, kissing my cheek. I said yeah, but I never smelled it on her when we went out together. Only when she came back from solo errands. Then there were the texts. At some point, her phone started lighting up a lot more than usual. "Always friends from work," she said. But I noticed she started tilting the screen away from me when we sat next to each other on the couch. Nothing dramatic, just subtle, intentional. She also turned off the sound. I catch her smiling at the screen in that half-smirk kind of way people do when they're talking to someone who gets them. Not the way she smiled at cat videos. A different kind of smile. A few times I caught her deleting threads. When I asked, she said, "It's just clutter. I'm clearing storage." That made sense. Sort of. And the blocked numbers. That was another thing. One night, I borrowed her phone to call mine after it slid between the couch cushions. Her recent call list showed blocked several times. I asked her, half joking, "Who's blocking you?" She shrugged. Said it was probably spam. "They're everywhere lately," she added. But the timestamps were always around lunchtime. Consistent. Like standing appointments. And then there was Ashley. Ashley was supposedly a new coworker she'd started hanging out with. Grabbing drinks after work, getting brunch on Saturdays, random Target runs. I didn't think much of it at first. But then one night, Jane mentioned going shopping with Ashley again. Only, she'd already told me earlier that day Ashley was out of town for a conference. I didn't say anything at the time, but it stuck. I even wrote it down in my phone's notes app. That's when I started noticing how often her stories didn't line up. Sometimes she'd forget what she told me the day before. Or she'd repeat an excuse like it was brand new. Once, she said she was helping her sister with a car issue. But her sister later posted an Instagram story showing her at a lake 2 states away. I pretended not to see it. Another time, Jane came home wearing new lingerie. Not for me. I only knew because I found it in the laundry. A deep red set. The kind of thing you don't wear to pick up groceries. I waited 2 nights. We didn't have S*X either night. She barely touched me at all that week. But what got to me the most, what haunted me, was her voice on the phone. When she didn't know I was nearby, she sounded different. Softer, like she was always keeping secrets. Like whoever she was talking to had earned a different version of her. A version I didn't know anymore. I caught her on the back patio once, pacing slowly, whispering. When I stepped outside, she jumped and said it was just her mom. But she never calls her mom that late. That's when I stopped assuming anything. I started tracking. I didn't go full surveillance mode. Not yet. But I began writing things down. Dates, times, locations, how long she was gone, what she said she was doing, what she was wearing, who she said she was with. I bought a small notebook and kept it in the glove compartment of my car. On March 14th, she left at 11:05 a.m. Said she had to get her oil changed. I timed it. She was gone 3 hours and 20 minutes. The shop she mentioned is 12 minutes away. I called them later that night, pretending to be her. They said they had no record of a recent visit. On March 18th, she said she was going to meet Ashley for drinks. She wore heels I hadn't seen in months and that same red lipstick she once said she reserved for nights that matter. She came back after midnight, didn't smell like alcohol, and didn't bring leftovers like she usually does. When I asked how it went, she said, "Fine, Ashley's going through stuff." But her voice was flat, like she was trying to sound tired, like she was performing exhaustion. On March 20th, she told me she'd be working late. I decided to drive by her office around 8 p.m. The lot was empty. That night I didn't sleep. I laid in bed next to her, watching her back rise and fall with each breath. I wanted to shake her awake and yell, "Who is he?" But I didn't have the proof. Not yet. And I didn't want to give her a chance to erase what I hadn't found. Because now I wasn't just suspicious. I was studying her patterns, her silences, the way she avoided long hugs, the way she pulled her hand away faster than she used to, the way her phone never left her side, even when she showered. She had become a different person, and I had become someone I didn't recognize, calculated, cold, distant. But I couldn't stop. I needed the truth. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Because if I didn't, she'd spin it. She'd gaslight me. She'd say I was paranoid, emotional, insecure. No, I wasn't going to give her that power. So I started preparing. Quietly, I backed up our shared photos, changed the password to my cloud drive, took *TS of everything I found odd, text previews, call logs, receipts. I started moving my important documents to a folder she didn't know about. I rehearsed questions in my head. Not emotional ones, factual ones. Things like, why is there a receipt from Bella Luna on a night you said you were home with a headache? Why did your friend Ashley check in on Facebook from San Diego when you said you were with her at Target? Who do you text with a smile at 11:30 p.m? I didn't ask them. Not yet. But I wrote them down. Because here's the truth. Once someone plants that seed of doubt, once they show you a glimpse of another life they're living without you, everything else begins to rot. Every shared joke, every forehead kiss, every little routine you used to love, it all turns gray. I started to see her not as my partner, but as a person who could lie, who was lying. And once I saw her that way, I couldn't unsee it. Something had shifted between us, and she didn't even notice. Or maybe she did and she didn't care. Either way, I was done pretending I didn't see the signs. Now I was watching. I was waiting. And I was ready. 3 days later, I called in sick to work. Didn't fake a cough. Didn't over-explain. Just said, "Not feeling well," and hung up. That was true in its own way. I was sick, just not in the way my boss would think. I had become hollowed out by suspicion, eaten alive by silent questions, and somewhere in the space where my trust used to be, I was now cold and quiet and focused, obsessively focused. I spent that morning sitting in my car, parked 3 streets over from our apartment building, watching through a crack in the rearview mirror. I had coffee in a travel mug, a granola bar I didn't touch, and my phone on airplane mode. The passenger seat held a small tripod I'd picked up the day before and a folded-up notebook where I'd written my best guess at what I was about to witness. And here's what I knew. Jane always left at 11:45 on Wednesdays. Said she was helping her friend's mom rearrange storage boxes. That was always the phrase, storage boxes. Oddly specific, suspiciously vague. She never came back with dust on her. Never sore. Never even annoyed, like anyone would be after 3 hours of moving things around in a stranger's garage. It was 12:17 p.m. when the car showed up. Dark gray Honda Accord. Tinted windows. License plate half covered with a dealer frame. It pulled up across from our building. Driver's side angled toward the curb like it knew exactly where to go. The man who got out was dressed for an office job, collared shirt, nice watch, leather shoes. He didn't hesitate. Just walked straight up to our building's side entrance, punched in the gate code, and disappeared inside. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. Even though I had no plan for what I'd do with them, I gave it 10 minutes, then 15. At the 17-minute mark, a light flicked on in our kitchen window, second floor, back left corner. That was ours. Jane stepped into view, wearing the red lingerie, the same set I found in the laundry a week ago, the same one she never wore for me. My heart didn't race. It slowed so much it felt like it stopped. I lifted my phone with mechanical precision, set it on the tripod, aimed it through the small slit in the tinted glass, and started recording. Just 30 seconds. That's all I needed. Jane in lingerie, in our kitchen, walking past the man who now stood beside her, shirtless, sipping from a coffee mug I bought last Christmas. That's when the denial broke. Not gradually, not softly, just gone. Everything I thought I could explain away collapsed. The strange perfumes, the calls from blocked numbers, the new smile, the tired excuses, all of it snapped together like puzzle pieces under pressure. There it was. She didn't just lie to me, she replaced me. And I didn't go home. I drove 3 neighborhoods over and parked at my uncle's mechanic shop. He wasn't there. I didn't tell him I was coming. I sat in the back corner of the lot, facing a chain-link fence and a pile of old tires, and stared at the footage on my phone. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my contacts, scrolled down to Matt Law, and hit send. Matt was an old friend from college. We weren't close anymore, but I remembered hearing through someone else that he had become a divorce attorney. We hadn't spoken in years. He picked up on the second ring. "Alex." "Yeah," I said, voice dry. "Can you take a case?" There was a long pause. "Whose case?" "Mine." 5 minutes later, I had an email address and a list of documents he'd need. He told me not to talk to Jane, not to confront her, not to give her any idea that I knew. "You only get one sh*t at the element of surprise," he said. So I didn't go home right away. I drove to a hardware store and bought a small safe, picked up a cheap prepaid phone, bought 2 flash drives, one for Matt, one to keep for myself. I transferred every file, every photo, every video, every screenshot*t onto both. Then I labeled the envelope with his name and slid the drive inside. I put the second one in my sock drawer at home, under a pile of old winter clothes she never touches. When I finally walked through the door that evening, Jane was on the couch in sweats, hair pulled back, watching a reality show with a bowl of popcorn in her lap. She smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey babe," she said. "Long day?" "Yeah," I replied, setting my keys down. Traffic was a nightmare. She made room for me on the couch and rested her feet on my lap. I sat there, nodding along to her commentary, pretending I cared about some contestant's drama. I didn't flinch, didn't accuse, didn't mention the man who drank from my cup and touched my wife. Because I had what I needed now. The proof, the silence, the strategy. That night, while she showered, I walked around the apartment slowly, memorizing details like a man preparing to leave a crime scene. I knew I wouldn't blow up. That wasn't my style. I wasn't going to be the guy screaming in the street or trashing the house. No, I was going to be the guy who left with receipts. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and just watched her sleep. It hit me then, how peaceful she looked, how familiar, like the woman I had fallen in love with still existed, even though I knew she didn't. She rolled over, reached for me out of habit, and mumbled something I didn't catch. And I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how many times she'd done the same thing after coming back from him. The idea of confronting her felt small now. Useless. What would it get me? Crocodile tears? Gaslighting? A performance? No thanks. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want an apology. I wanted out. But I wanted out my way. So I spent that day tying up loose ends, calling the bank, opening new personal accounts, removing my name from subscriptions, changing passwords. I even rerouted my direct deposit. No fireworks, no fights, just forward motion. That night, when Jane said she was heading out for a quick run to Walgreens, I noted the time. 9:42 p.m. She came back at 11:10 with a plastic bag containing a single bottle of lotion and a bag of trail mix. I nodded, said, "Cool." She kissed my cheek. I didn't turn away, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done searching for answers. Done giving her space to lie. Done holding onto the version of her that no longer existed. When we went to bed, she fell asleep fast. Maybe it was the guilt, or maybe just the comfort of having two lives and thinking no one noticed. But I was already planning my exit. And this time there would be no discussion. Only facts. Only actions. Because the truth doesn't need a witness. It just needs a line drawn behind it. And I had drawn mine. The morning after I caught Jane in the kitchen with him. The morning after I filed the evidence and called the lawyer. I stood in our bathroom, looking at my own reflection like I was meeting a stranger. Same face, same routine, but everything behind my eyes was different. I wasn't thinking about why she did it. I wasn't even thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about structure, boundaries, quiet steps with long echoes. By the time Jane stirred awake, I had already moved the first set of files. Birth certificate, passport, car title, social security card. All of it went into a folder marked A, and into the new fireproof safe I'd installed in the trunk of my car the night before. She didn't even know I'd bought one. She didn't know a lot of things anymore. That was the point. At breakfast, she joked about how I was suddenly an early bird. "I'm evolving," I said, pouring my coffee. She laughed and asked if I was okay. I said yes. And then I changed the passwords to our streaming accounts. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, the shared Spotify. I logged her out of everything, created new usernames, and left just one account open for her, the food delivery app. Everything else was mine now. My music, my watch list, my history. That same afternoon, I transferred the majority of my savings into a new account. Quietly, I left just enough in the joint account to keep the lights on, pay rent, and cover whatever else she was used to. But the big stuff, the real stuff, it was under lock and key now, mine alone. I didn't change the way I spoke. I didn't start arguments. I didn't say, "I know what you did." That would have given her too much control, too much drama. Instead, I became neutral. I became a new version of myself. Calm, composed, unavailable. That was the beginning of her unraveling. She noticed it almost immediately. She'd reach for my hand while we walked to the car, and I'd slide it into my pocket instead. She'd text me something random and I'd reply with cool or all right. No smiley face, no warmth. 2 days later, she tried cooking my favorite meal, chicken marsala, garlic mashed potatoes, steamed broccoli. She even lit a candle at the table. I said thanks, ate it, complimented the wine pairing, then went to bed early without touching her once. The next morning, she lingered in the kitchen longer than usual. I could feel her studying me, like I was a painting she couldn't interpret anymore. She made up some excuse about wanting to check in and asked if I was stressed. Said I'd seemed distant. "I've just been thinking a lot lately," I said, and nothing more. The less I gave her, the more she panicked. That same day, I bought and installed a small motion-triggered camera by the front door, disguised as a USB charger. Completely silent. She never noticed it. I also placed a tile tracker in her car's glove box. Not because I wanted to follow her, because I wanted confirmation. Quiet receipts. Patterns. Evidence for later in case she tried to deny it all. That night, she offered to give me a back rub. I said no. That weekend, she bought concert tickets. One of my favorite bands. I pretended I had a migraine and stayed in. She went alone. On Sunday, she asked if I wanted to go for a drive. I said maybe later. I could feel her desperation building like steam behind a sealed door. Every nice gesture she made felt like a test. Every text she sent was a fishing line. I didn't bite. I became methodical. Every file I touched, every log I kept, every legal form I completed. It was all with the steady focus of a man already emotionally packed. I scanned our lease, cataloged receipts, took pictures of furniture we bought together. I marked down who paid for what. I looked up comparable rent prices in other neighborhoods and made a spreadsheet for the split. I emailed it to myself from an encrypted burner address. The lawyer and I met again. He said I was moving with surgical precision. Most people come in here yelling, he said. You're doing math. I told him that yelling gives people space to play the victim. I wasn't going to give Jane that chance. At night, she started initiating int asterisk Macy again. Touches in the hallway. Random kisses on my shoulder while I did dishes. Sitting a little closer on the couch. I let her try. I just didn't let her win. The less I reacted, the more she spun. She started asking where I was going when I left the apartment. Started asking what I was working on. She checked my calendar. Hovered by my office door. I answered every question with calm indifference. Oh, just errands. Some paperwork. I'm just sorting things. She tried to initiate fights, small things at first. Dishes in the sink. How I was being cold. I didn't give in. I just smiled and said, sorry, and walked out of the room, because I didn't want resolution. I wanted distance. There's a special kind of peace that comes from being the one who knows, who's done pretending, who's not waiting for answers because the answers are already printed, saved, and filed. I watched her trying to stitch the old rhythm back together. She started dressing nicer around the house, putting on music she used to hate. My music. Making comments about vacation spots she always wanted us to try. But it was too late, because I wasn't in the same house anymore. I was behind the walls, watching, measuring, building the exit. One night, after we ate dinner in silence, she stood in the doorway and asked, "Are you still in this with me?" I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "We'll talk soon." That's when I knew she knew, or at least she felt it. And that's when I knew I had won. Not because I had hurt her, not because I'd retaliated, but because I no longer needed her to tell me the truth. Because I already had it. And that's when I started sleeping soundly again. It was supposed to be a single meeting. Just documents, evidence, clean legal support with no emotions attached. That's how I met Laura. Matt, my lawyer, had told me he was working with another client in a similar situation. He said she was sharp, organized, and already 2 steps ahead of her soon-to-be ex. Her name came up when he asked if I wanted a referral to someone who could help me organize my digital files and asset lists. "She's done this before," he said. "Trustworthy. No drama. You'll like her." I didn't care about liking anyone. I cared about precision. But when I showed up at the quiet little law office just outside the city, Laura was already seated in the small glass-walled conference room, flipping through a binder that looked like it weighed 5 pounds. She wore glasses, a clean navy sweater, and no ring. When she looked up and met my eyes, there was no pity in her expression, no awkward smile, just recognition, like she already knew. "Alex?" she asked. I nodded. "Laura?" She stood and shook my hand. Firm grip. No fake charm. I appreciated that immediately. "I looked through your files," she said, sliding a manila folder toward me. "They're good. But you're missing timestamps on a few of the screensh *ts. And some of your photo metadata can be stripped if she gets access to your drive." I blinked. "You're thorough," I said. "I've had practice." That first meeting lasted an hour. We didn't talk about anything except what needed to be done. File structure, legal prep, account freezing, app logins, timeline charts. No personal stories. No venting. But when I left the office that day, I didn't feel drained. I felt calm. And that was rare. We met again the next week. She'd found a more efficient way to format my documentation and helped me redact some financials I didn't realize were too revealing. I thanked her. She said, "We're both just trying to land the plane." That was the first time I smiled in days. By the third meeting, it started to feel less like business. She brought coffee from a local shop and added, "I figured you're probably tired of the stuff from your Keurig." I hadn't even realized how bad it had gotten until I took a sip of what she brought and felt something loosen in my chest. We still talked about logistics, but somewhere in the middle of a discussion about property valuation, I asked, "So, what happened with you?" She didn't flinch. She closed the folder and said, "My husband started sleeping with your wife. That's what happened." My stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" She leaned back, completely unbothered. Gray Honda, business casual, kinda smug face. I stared at her. She nodded. "Yeah, that's Richard." Silence filled the room. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw the coffee against the wall. "I'm sorry," I said stupidly. "Don't be. I'm not." It turned out she had figured things out before I did. Found text messages, emails, hotel receipts. She hadn't said anything to me before because, as she put it, "You were still waking up." We sat in silence for a long time after that. Not awkward silence. Just wait. Two people at the bottom of the same well. From that point on, something shifted. We didn't become flirty or emotional. That would have been too much too soon. Instead, we became aligned. Strategic allies. Both of us had lived through the same quiet betrayal. The same eroding of trust that doesn't explode but dissolves everything slowly, cell by cell. We started meeting for coffee on neutral ground. A spot with outdoor tables and bad jazz music playing from a tinny speaker overhead. We didn't schedule these meetings. They just started happening. She'd bring her laptop. I'd bring whatever paperwork I was working on. Sometimes we didn't talk about the divorces at all. We talked about how weird it was to sit across from someone who got it without needing the full story. How the hardest part wasn't the betrayal, it was how normal everything still looked from the outside. One morning, she said, "You ever feel like you're just playing a version of yourself for everyone else's comfort?" I nodded. I used to think I was the problem, because I couldn't just move on. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." That's when it stopped being about the paperwork. We weren't friends, exactly. We weren't dating. We were something else. Two people who had been hollowed out and were now building new shapes from the broken outlines. She told me she'd stopped crying a while ago. "Not because I'm strong," she said. "Because at some point you run out of tears." I told her I'd stopped yelling in my head. "Not because I'm calm," I said. "Because I don't want to waste volume on someone who's not listening." The first time she came to my place, it wasn't planned. We'd met for dinner. Just two people who didn't want to sit alone in front of microwaved leftovers. I had told her about my favorite Thai place, and we went. It was easy. No tension. No subtext. When I offered to drive her home, she said yes. When I missed the turn to her apartment on purpose, she didn't say anything. When we pulled into my driveway, she just sat there, holding the takeout bag in her lap. "You want to come in?" I asked. She didn't answer. Just opened the door and followed me inside. We didn't sleep together that night. We sat at my kitchen table eating noodles straight from the containers, talking about everything except our exes. She asked me what my favorite book was. I asked her if she believed in second chances, not for other people but for ourselves. When she kissed me, it wasn't out of desperation, or sadness, or longing. It felt like recognition. Two people who had survived being shattered and were still standing. Not whole. Not fixed. Just still here. That kiss was quiet. No fireworks. Just a moment where all the noise stopped. And for the first time since this started, I felt something I didn't think I could feel again. Not passion. Not revenge. Not even closure. Just peace. We didn't make promises. We didn't rush. But the next morning, when she made coffee in my kitchen and pulled her sleeves over her hands, I realized something. This wasn't a rebound. She wasn't an escape. She was an anchor, a reminder that I still existed, that I wasn't just the sum of someone else's betrayal. I was rebuilding, not alone, not out of spite, but because something better was still possible. Even after everything, I didn't wait for a fight. No warning, no speech. I just left. On a Tuesday, while Jane was out, I packed what mattered: tools, old photos, my favorite coffee mug, and placed a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside, signed papers, account transfers, a breakdown of everything. On top, a short note: the papers are filed. Keys are on the hook. Don't call. That was it. I didn't take the TV. I didn't touch her things. I walked out and never looked back. When she came home to find the silence, she called. Then she texted. Then she begged. I didn't answer. By that night, I was already at Laura's. Small house outside the city, garden in the back, 2 hammocks swinging in the wind. No drama, no mess, just the sound of peace at last. 1 year later, Jane's still a ghost. She sent messages through friends, letters I never opened, but I never replied. I don't need closure, I already built it. Laura and I work quietly and honestly. She gardens. I build furniture. We have slow mornings, good coffee, and no lies. My final message to Jane was never sent, but I wrote it in my head 1,000 times. You're no longer in my house. You're no longer in my life. Next time you want 2 lives, don't build them on someone else's. I don't hate her. I just stopped needing anything from her. That's the difference. Now I wake up to honesty, to stillness, to a life that no longer waits for apologies that will never come. It's not about revenge. It's about peace and finally having it.